What social movements are you part of, and how would you define your activism?
That is a hard question. Having worked for well over 15 years in HIV and AIDS, I guess I would consider myself part of the AIDS movement, although as we have discussed before, it's fairly fragmented and it's hard to know whether you could actually call it a movement anymore. More broadly, I guess I would consider myself part of the feminist movement. I am a feminist, although I'm a man, of course. Anybody opposed to patriarchy I would consider a feminist, or eligible to consider themselves a feminist. But those two, I think, would be the main movement I would associate with. My activism has taken many shapes. I'm not even sure that activism is the right term, other than yes, linking with activist networks, doing research with activists, and in my former role supporting organizations financially and technically who do activism on HIV or gender. I should maybe add one thing, by the way, about the third movement, if you want to call it that, the sex workers' rights movement. I consider it incredibly important in HIV as well as in feminism. Similarly, the various sexual rights movements. I'm not sure I can define myself as a member of them, but I'm definitely linked to them and support them ideologically as well as practically in different ways I can.
And what do you think about this men's movement, or groups of men working with men?
Yes, of course. Yes, I'm not sure. Again, I guess maybe it's not so different from feminism, but I find it a little bit hard to consider it a movement. The men and masculinities field, I would probably prefer to refer to it. Yes, so the Men Engage Alliance, for example, is, I guess, the beginnings of a movement of men who are concerned about gender equality and working in that field. It's obviously, like any movement, very diverse, from fairly conservative to fairly radical and or politicized. I think it's very important. I think it needs to be engaged with and challenged as well. And I guess, yeah, I mean, I would have, when I said I'm a feminist and belong to the feminist movement, I would actually consider my work in that area, which I'm very focused on, as work in feminism and linked to the feminist movement, which is different from, saying, the women's movement.
What are you doing leads men to behave differently?
Pardon?
You think?
Sorry?
What are you doing in terms of your work and activism leads men to behave in a different way?
Well, I try to, well, most of the people I reach and talk to and speak to in my work are people who are already interested in gender equality and or the involvement of men and masculinities. What I try to convey to them is basically challenging our own very deep-seated stereotypes that we import into our work and our view of the world, including holding ourselves to account. So, I mean, ideas about masculinity and femininity and gender, and essentially ideas about what women and men are, is very much encoded in so much development work. And I try to challenge that on a regular basis, but also bring it back to a personal level, reflecting on our own position in this. So me as a white northern male, fairly well-off country, engaging in the realities of gender, masculinity in countries of the South, such as Zambia or Ecuador or anywhere. That actually places a lot of onus and responsibility on me for being self-reflective of my own position in this, and how I might color my perception of what's going on, as well as how I influence what is going on inadvertently sometimes. And also, when I said bringing it down to the personal, being more clear about how I see my own patriarchal privileges in my life, which I certainly have enjoyed and which have not all been good for me, but having come to recognize them. So on, being a divorced man with 3 children, part-time father, part-time single parent, and 1 child which is a different biological father and so on, I've had to face a lot of the issues of masculinities and so on. And of course, relying on my former wife to take care of the children primarily, whilst I charged ahead and developed a career, including in gender and HIV and gender equality, and the ironies inherent in all of that have come home to roost. I'm much more aware of these now, and I think I try to challenge others to be clear about what investments we have in the system and how that may color what we do.
Okay. In your opinion, what are the challenges and tensions between women's movements and other social movements? Like working with men, for example, or...
Okay, yes, I mean, in that one I think, and possibly on both sides, both the women's movement, if you like, and the emerging, shall we say, movement of men on masculinities, I think the big challenge is this heteronormative binary view of what gender is, and many in the women's movement focusing very much on women as mothers and carers and workers, but essentially different from men. And in the men's movement, focusing on men as fathers and lovers and partners, but essentially different from women. All within a very prescriptive, if you like, heteronormative framework of the monogamous nuclear family, which is geared towards dual parenting, and I think that's the key source of tension, and not challenging that binary system sufficiently, because we all have investments in that, whether we are aware of them or not. So I think that would, for me, be the key challenge and tension. I mean, historically, the second one, not even historically, still very much so, on the men and masculinity side, is to be more clear about the reality of gender inequality. And I don't just mean men and women, I mean in an intersectional sense where gender is social relation, power difference, and there are many forms of masculinities, there are many ways of being women, there are ways of being transgender, etc. So focusing on an intersectional analysis of power and difference. The men's movement, if you like, can be very blind to that, and sometimes being quite defensive and reactive against having been left out of gender, so to speak. I think it's important to challenge it in terms of taking a stand on gender equality and human rights, equal human rights for all. Of course, most of my immediate colleagues are fairly pro-feminist, there's no doubt about that. But nevertheless, we have investments in this system that are not always at the forefront of our enemy's mind. So